And I'm going to get us started by introducing our moderator, Jamie Ledstone. So he is from the Climate Reality Project Canada. Jamie is a graduate of political theory from Concordia University. His experience is defined by mobilization in the field, and particularly more by his role in the student mobilization during the 2019 climate strikes. Um, I'm going to let him actually introduce himself more because I think he has a little bit more personalized note to say. So I'll pass it to you, Jamie.
Thank you. Oh, good timing, Sarah. I was still muted until that last second there. So yeah, hi everybody. Just to let you guys know, everything I'll say, I'll probably translate in French right after to give a quick break to our translators. So yeah, my name is Jamie Latvedis, he, him pronouns. I come from a small town called Hemingford, which is south of Quebec, well, in southern Quebec, sorry. It's a town of about 800 people, so it's a very small town. I run a farm there. I also work with the Climate Reality Project. And we're talking about a subject that's really close to me, rural mobilization. We will talk about the challenges. We'll dive deep into the subject. And again, this will be to get the sentiment and experience of people that live it firsthand. But if you want the actual tools, check out the toolkit. I'll go to French now. Bonjour tout le monde. Pour commencer, pour ceux qui n'avaient peut-être pas compris en anglais, le panel va être disponible en français tout au long par une traduction en live. Il faut aller sur le petit globe qui est en bas de l'écran, puis choisir la colonne français. Sinon, je m'introduis, je m'appelle Jamie Ladvetis, je suis de pronom il. Je viens d'un petit village qui s'appelle Hemingford au sud du Québec, un petit village d'environ 800 personnes. J'ai une ferme là-bas que j'opère, puis en même temps, je travaille pour le projet de la réalité climatique. Puis vu que la déclaration du territoire non cédé n'a pas été faite en français, je vais peut-être tenir à mentionner rapidement que je viens des terres non cédées de la nation Haudenosaunee et puis Ganingaraga. Je pense que ça fait pas mal de tour. Oh, on me demande si je parle bien. Ouais, OK. Parfait. I'll go back to English now. We'll get right into it. I'll ask the first question. The first question is meant to be to give a chance to the panelists to also introduce themselves. I'll ask the question in English first, and then I'll switch to French, and I'll let you guys answer. So as simple as this, tell us about how you got started in your work and also about the work that you do. I'll give you a chance to say your full names and pronouns as well. Donc, la première question va comme suit. Parle-nous un peu de toi, du travail que tu fais, puis comment tu as commencé dans le domaine que tu es en ce moment. So, that being done, I'll just pick one of you out at random. I'm sorry, that might be torture. Alex, how about you get us going? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. No problem. Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Ledstone. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm super honored to be asked to join you all today and to chat about these issues around rural organizing. So I am based in Mohkinstsis, otherwise known as Calgary, which is in Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and all others who make their homes in this region in southern Alberta. So in terms of how I got started in my work, I was on the path to become a lawyer, and I was in law school and actually finished that degree when I was quite disappointed with the lack of opportunities to drive change in law and in environmental law in particular. It seemed like a really slow and roundabout way to get things done, a lot of work trying to raise funds to just go to court. So I decided to take a career change and do a master's in climate change development and policy. So the summer before I started my master's, I was connected with a counselor in Nelson, BC called Rick Logtenberg, and he was starting a group of locally elected officials who could get together to discuss issues around climate change and how to drive climate action at the local level. So he wanted to host a summit that summer full of elected officials from across the country who were working on these issues. And my dad basically volunteered me to organize the whole summit, even though I had zero organizing experience ever. And so it went pretty well. I had some help from some other folks in the network. And so I just stayed on as a volunteer after that and eventually was hired full time. So now the organization has grown into a national network of over 650 locally elected officials, leading the transformation for our communities to thrive. And we support locally elected officials in three main ways. So we provide connection opportunities, we provide resources for them to do work in their communities, and we do advocacy to other levels of government on behalf of locally elected officials. So I'll wrap it up there.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Sivan, want to take the follow-up?
Sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Suzanne Black-Rochin. So honored to be here, and nice to also see some familiar faces in the audience. So how did I get involved into all this? Well, I'm actually from Montreal, but my husband and I, upon visiting his family in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, we fell in love and decided that this is where we want to be. So we are building our lives out there, and I had no prior experience in environmental activism, anything like that. I'm a teacher. I trained as a teacher. I'm also in podcasting. But in January 2022, I believe it was, a golf course developer targeted our local provincial park in West Mabu with the intention to lease 1/3 of it to build a golf course, and that is what got me involved in environmental activism, was the campaign to prevent this from happening. And that was really my welcome, my introduction into the community. So yeah, that's about me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sivan. I'll go to Margaret now, since there's kind of a connection to be made there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret Mell, and I was involved in the campaigns along with Sivan to save West Mabu Beach Provincial Park and from golf course development in both 2018 and then again 4 years later in 2020. I too had no previous experience, but was just compelled to jump in and start figuring out how we need to start fighting this proposal. It wasn't a question of whether or not I would get involved. I just simply felt compelled. There wasn't a question, just what do we got to do? So I just did whatever I could to support the campaign, particularly in 2018. I just started. It was like, what do I do? So there was one person in the community who was a very, very much an experienced champion of the park, Nadine Hunt. She had fought for the property to become a park in 2001. And she also fought to save that particular property, that area, from development 2 previous times to 2018. So she and I, she had previous experience, but it was just, we started, sending emails back and forth, and there was a beach committee that was also working with Nadine. And I just got on the internet and said, who are the environmental community organizations in Nova Scotia? And I found about 30 different organizations that I could start sending emails out to and say, this is happening. What do we need to do? We took it from there, and then more and more people joined in. That was really helpful, made some really nice connections with the Ecology Action Center, with CPAWS, Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society. So when it happened a mere 4 years later, there was sort of a sense of what we needed to do. In the meantime, the whole Owl's Head debacle had happened, and so there was a lot of organizations around that we could immediately tap into. They had, a wealth of experience in terms of what to do. So 2020, we got going even faster because we had made some initial connections, and Owl's Head had happened in the meantime. That was another golf course proposal that took 2 years to fight. And then the minute that was over, almost, was the issue with West Mabu Park. So for me, it was just my love of the park and its beauty and its unique ecological features that motivated me to work tirelessly to save the park. It was pretty much a 24/7 deal. It was all I thought about, all any of us I thought about, I think, for the duration of both the campaigns in 2018 and 2022. It was a labor of love, and it was that love that fueled my passion and all my efforts. And, you know, we were involved in writing letters to the editor, administrating a Facebook page, Sivan was so instrumental in getting the website up and running. We had a lawn sign campaign, and we got a lot of help from the Owl's Head folks who had just completed one a few months earlier. And we were also involved in the People's Parade for Life. It was an Earth Day event, and we were also involved in that. And now I'm also involved in phase 2 of the campaign, which is working to get amendments to the Provincial Parks Act enacted so that this doesn't keep happening again and again and again as it has. And so that when something is protected, it can actually mean that it's protected, and that, you know, protected means protected in perpetuity. So this work is very much ongoing. I was part of a very dedicated group of volunteers, and we very quickly came together as a team, and all of us were really driven by the desire just to save this beautiful, ecologically significant piece of property.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Payton, it's up to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Payton. I use she, her, they pronouns, and I'm from Haldimand County, Ontario, Haldimand, Norfolk region, which is about an hour and a half south of Toronto, right on Lake Erie. So I came to this kind of work partially because I had some really big shoes to fill. So my late grandmother was a elementary school teacher and a Anglican minister, and she did a lot of environmental work in my community that I got to hear about while I was growing up. She ran a campaign in the 80s to have recycling added to our waste management system, like long before most rural communities had recycling, and was really passionate about reconciliation with the nearby reserves to where we lived. And then climate and all those elements were like very much in the background of my life growing up because I lived in a fossil fuel community. So the Nanticoke Industrial Park, what used to be the largest coal-fired power plant in North America. It was North America's largest single-source polluter until it was demolished in about 2011. And I experienced like severe childhood asthma as a result of that. So it was always sort of sitting in the background, but because the coal plant was demolished and the smog days went away, and I saw solar panels and wind turbines popping up all across my community, when I moved to Montreal in 2017 to go to university, I was honestly under the impression that we were on track to meet any sort of climate goals that we had, that, you know, I could see a transition happening in front of me. And I experienced a rude awakening in 2018 when the IPCC report came out, which spurred me into action along with like thousands of students around the world and across Quebec, along with Jamie and tons of other folks through Ledstone and Climate Strike Canada. So we did a lot of campus-based organizing. We did a lot of provincial coalition building and like some national organizing, which was a really beautiful sort of training ground for me to gain a lot of skills that I was able to bring back to my community during the COVID pandemic, so that I could sort of coordinate some responses with like former high school classmates, former elementary school classmates, former coworkers, and people like that. So I was able to participate in a lot of really exciting campaigns. One of those was sort of the more national one was, it was called No Future, No Children. So what that was a campaign to try and highlight to, the idea was sort of try to highlight to older folks in your immediate family, the like severity and urgency of the climate crisis by having conversations with them about why you were either questioning or had chosen not to like have children in your lifetime. And that reason was like deeply tied to climate uncertainty and sort of like the political and healthcare and all these other uncertainties that compound with that. So that was a really successful campaign. You can watch the CBC Gem documentary, Climate Baby Dilemma, if you're interested. So I was able to participate in that, as well as, you know, a number of other sort of like climate student strike related activities. And then in my community, we were able to plan some really great actions around justice for migrant farm workers in the really like brutal way that they were treated as they were incoming in 2020. And we were dealing with sort of like the emerging pandemic, as well as a number of community solidarity actions in support of 1492 Land Back Lane, and lots of other actions that are sort of like ebb and flow. So thanks so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much to all four of you already. Yeah, I'm getting this refreshing feeling that well, we often talk about climate change in these vast sort of like political terms, and just already in this conversation, we're seeing like the concrete front of what that looks like, what like that climate movement actually looks like on the ground. So let's keep going. Question number two, it's already a bit of a spicy question. In organizing, sometimes you could find success working alongside those in power, and sometimes you find success working against those in power. So what has been your experience about this issue? And what's a story you can share with us about that work? I'll say it in French now. La deuxième question va comme suit. Quand on organise, quand on se mobilise, des fois, ceux qui détiennent le pouvoir peuvent être d'une très grande aide pour nous. Puis des fois, c'est le contraire. On trouve plus de succès quand on se bat contre ceux qui sont au pouvoir. On demande donc aux panélistes quel genre d'expérience ils ont par rapport à ce sujet-là, puis s'ils ont des expériences à nous partager par rapport. Okay, so there it is. How about we start this time with Payton, since you finished last, if you want to go.
Sure. Yeah, so it can be difficult. It can be difficult in small communities to truly be able sometimes to stand up to power in the ways that you can in cities. And a lot of that is due to like the proximity that we have to power. So like your dirty politician isn't just like somebody who you've seen on TV or read about in the newspaper. You like went to school with their son, and you like have, you know, like you like actually know them. You like know why they got a divorce. Like everything is just like really sort of like intermixed in a way that can make things difficult. But then there's also sort of, you know, that's like a bit the funny side, but the more severe side is that people with power can impact you and your family's employment. They can impact your ability to be taken seriously in the community, and they can have things just sort of like shut down. So a challenge that we experienced when we were doing the migrant farm workers campaign was that we were sort of put into a position where we had to cooperate with farmers because of just the sheer amount of influence that farmers had, that like so many people who were involved in organizing were like very scared to be like openly contrary to like farmers as a whole. And we're only really comfortable targeting like one farmer in particular. And because of this, the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change like refused to cooperate with us. Like we were in conversations with them, but they couldn't align their organization with our actions because we were more or less working like with management, even though, you know, we weren't working with the farmer who we were like directly protesting. And I'll give some more context to what happened. But basically, during 2020, as migrant workers were coming into the community to do farm work, as they do every season, there was a number of like extremely racist policies that were put in place by the local health authority. One of which was a isolation quarantine period where they were put into motels and like one person to a room for over 14 days, which was like longer than the recommended isolation time. So this caused severe mental health problems for those who were experiencing that. They didn't know when they were getting out. They weren't well communicated with, and it was a quite traumatizing experience for folks. The other one is that they actually tried to initiate a carding system where migrant workers would be required to carry a card with them that had their arrival in Canada date, their most recent vaccination, and the name and contact information of the farmer who was employing them. So there was a number of these sort of like really crazy policies that were being introduced that they were not province-wide, like they were specific to our municipality, and there was sort of similar things in other small communities like this, but this was quite severe. And then everything came to a head when there was this one farmer in particular. If you live in Ontario or maybe elsewhere, you might have seen Scotland transport trucks. So the Scotland group, one of the farms that they had, they refused medical treatment for COVID to a worker and father who died because of the refusal of medical treatment, and he was forced to continue to work while he was sick. And the sort of whistleblower, one of his colleagues, was fired and deported after he sort of alerted Migrant Workers Alliance for Change about this situation. So people were quite comfortable targeting that farmer in particular because of how egregious what had happened there was and how specific it was, and also because people didn't like him anyway because he has a helipad in his front of his mansion. So he was a really like obvious target that you could point at and say like, this is the problem. But then there was other farmers who sort of considered themselves to be good. You know, they do different things for workers that the Scotland group didn't do, like give air conditioning, like really basic things. But to them, they didn't have a legal requirement to do those things. So to them, it felt like it was like a huge like gift to like air condition the bunkers and things like that. So we ran a campaign. It was a letter writing campaign as well as a rally, and we also did a postering action. So because we were in like such a spread out community, we weren't able to poster in the traditional sense where maybe you would get like pieces of paper and glue and plaster them around. We use similar to like campaign sign posters so that we could put them on the side of roads and people could see them while they were driving, and also so that we could have them along the routes that people took to go work in the fields for the day, that they would see essentially signs that were like similar to sort of like the thank you to essential workers. They were written in Spanish as well as English so that people could understand sort of like that we were trying to do sort of a gesture that we see them and that there is advocacy happening around the situations that we're hearing about, and that we're not sort of immobile or like uncaring to the situation that they were finding themselves in. And because of the high overhead costs of that, like we needed partnerships with farmers to finance it. I was also kind of outvoted by older members who were like more willing to cooperate with people because like they knew them and like they went to high school with them. They're like, oh, he's a great guy. Like you just don't understand the like interpolitics of everything. So it does become challenging in that aspect, that like it is hard to villainize people. It is very hard to villainize people when everyone knows each other. Some people can be obvious villains, like if you have a helicopter pad in front of your mansion, people like not everyone likes you. So yeah, that was sort of the main challenge that we faced was this sort of balance of partnering with farmers in order to have like access to funds and legitimacy, because we didn't have any other sort of like funding from big environmental charities or any other sort of charities. But also wanting to stay true to, you know, the plight that people are experiencing and not, you know, legitimize, you know, not end up being sort of making excuses for the other types of abuses that every farmer who participates in the temporary foreign worker program is complacent in. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Payton. I might have some follow-up questions about that notion of proximity in rural communities, or how your reputation's kind of at play and how it's a fragile balance there, but I'll come back to you after, okay? Does anybody want to follow up after Payton on the same question about dealing with the power holders in your community?
I mean, I just want to say what you said, Payton, that totally rings true. And I mean that like just about proximity and social cohesion at the end of the day being such a high value. I mean that's basically what it's all about, right? And it's funny, Margaret and I we were chatting this morning just about this question in preparation, and we, you know, the first thing was to identify, okay, so who were the actual power players like in our particular situation? And there's obviously the golf course developer, and you know, I mean, for them, there was no real working with them. You know, they were trying to do something that we're actively fighting against. But then the other power, of course, is government. I mean, we were trying to get like the goal was for government to turn down or to shut down any possibility of a proposal for the golf company to put forth a proposal to develop in the park. So something that was really important to us was I guess not being antagonistic. It's really this balance of, you know, you are our partners. We want to work together in this. It's you know, it's engaging in respectful dialogue, but then at the same time saying, you know, you are accountable, right? So it
Mhm.
was like finding that kind of form of communication. Margaret, anything what do you think about that?
Sure, I can sort of add what I was thinking about. So we had two sort of powers that we had to contend with. One was the foreign billionaire golf developer, who had already developed two very successful golf courses in the area. So he kind of had that credibility. And he also had a track record of going after pristine, protected land, not just in Nova Scotia, but in Scotland, in Oregon, in St. Lucia. So we felt a little bit like a David and Goliath situation. And then we had the Nova Scotia government, who, due to the weaknesses of the outdated Provincial Parks Act, had the ability to secretly, without consultation, delist a provincial park. So we were living with the threat of that could kind of happen at any moment, and we would know about it. And we would just get the news, the news release that, yep, they were given permission to build this golf course, and either it's not a park anymore, or they're going to lease it, and whatever that meant. So or the government also had, as we all know, the government also had the ability to say what type of activity could take place in a provincial park. So our approach with the two players were very different. With the developer, we just simply, had to counter their arguments of jobs, even though they were part-time seasonal jobs. Their argument of them being the savior of the county's economy. We had to counter their greenwashing. For example, they would say that a beach dune could be developed, could be preserved, while it was also being turned into a pesticide-laden, golf green. Or the greenwashing that the course design was certified as meeting the environmental standards by Audubon International, not to be confused with, but precisely to be confused with, the Audubon Society. We had to counter their entitlement and arrogance of wanting to buy up public land and turn it into a playground for the rich. And we had to educate and warn regarding this worldwide trend of billionaire developers buying up ecologically sensitive areas for their own personal profit and enjoyment, and all the real estate that follows from that. We had to counter the claim of this being about community development, which was a big one. And we had to counter that with the reality that this was in fact exploitation, that they were coming to steal our land, to steal our public land, right? Our public park land. So it wasn't, in terms of the billionaire, the foreign billionaire, it wasn't complicated at all. We were 100% opposed to the development. It was a non-starter. It was a no-brainer. With the government, we took a different approach, and it was that we had to appeal to their own proclamations of wanting to protect 20% of Nova Scotia's land by 2030. And to appeal to their own proclamations that they made in their own government documents and policies, in particular the Parks and Protected Areas Plan. So that relationship was more nuanced, to the degree that it was a relationship. For a long time, they just ignored us, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. We were just ignored, and we didn't, have any sense of being heard, even though thousands of letters are being written, and just no response. So the relationship was more nuanced in that we were demanding to be heard and consulted with, and to have our democratic rights protected, while we were also appealing to them to be the champions of our cause, and to be the champions of their own policies. So we were sort of saying, come on, work with us, and it'll look really good on you, right? Because you're going to actually be following through on
Promises that you made.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were very strategic in our messaging, making sure that we were hitting all the angles. We had a schedule of posting on our Facebook page. So on Monday, we had a certain theme. On Tuesday, we had a certain theme, throughout the days of the week. And so one day we would have an environmental focus about the biodiversity in the park. Another day, we would just invite people to share their wonderful stories and memories of time spent in the park. Another day, we would have some challenge to the government, and where was our local MLA, who was also deputy premier? Why wasn't he, coming out and having, taking a stand one way or the other? Yeah, those were the types of ways that we dealt with the powers at be in this issue.
Yeah. And finding ways to get their attention in ways that aren't like overtly antagonistic, but at the same time effective. Yeah, that was a challenge.
Yeah, and what are you, so I guess we're going to swing back to the question I wanted to ask Payton. What are you risking by seeming too antagonistic? We talked about reputation and it being a small town, everybody knows you. And Hope and I and Sarah, we were talking about this question and a way to formulate it. I feel like we're touching upon a lot by asking this question, but yeah, what is the danger of risking that reputation or, getting labeled as something in your community? And how much does that play into your campaigns?
Is this just open for any of
Yeah.
us to, to respond to? Oh my God. I mean, it's huge. It's your okay. So we were talking about power, but if I'm getting the prompt, if I'm getting the question, it's not just about power. It's a question about your just relationships with everyone. I mean, okay. So for me, this is like I'm moving to this community. This is a new community for me, right? And I don't want to off the bat, start making these enemies. These are my neighbors. These are people that we have to rely upon each other, in situations where, say the power goes out, for example, or, like in these really real situations, like we have to rely on one another. So it's such a challenge. It's such a challenge, like how to approach that really. And I mean, even, in terms of like your own family, like how to navigate these relationships where people have differing views in your own family. And, what I found ended up happening was, you love these people so much. And at the end of the day, because you love them so much, you're just like, no, we're putting this aside, right? So it's like constantly weighing the values. Yeah.
What comes first, right? Community or climate transition? What's more important?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
Payton,
like,
I
what a
saw you were
question.
unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could, like, everything that you're saying is so true, Sivan. And it's a delicate balance of expressing your own values and advocating for things that need to change without alienating the people around you or making them feel like shame or anything along those lines. So and it's also, like when bringing it back to Jamie's question of what is like the risk, like aside from sort of like the material risks, like, for myself, I'm a renter. I was concerned that like the landlord class in the area I live in, like, would not be comfortable renting to me if you cause too much of a storm and they Google your name and it's just you in the news causing problems. Like maybe they wouldn't think you're a great tenant. I actually got my apartment because my aunt is good friends with the landlord's daughter. So that was the only reason that I was able to sort of access that housing, because it's all very relational, for housing, for jobs, for leadership opportunities, things like committees and councils and participating in nonprofits and things like that. So those are sort of like the material risks that you take on. But then sort of like the movement-based risk is that if you try to move too fast, you will burn the bridges and then you won't be able to move at all. So and I hesitate to say incrementalism because that means, it's such a negative sort of word that we've come to, but coaxing people towards like becoming radical when they don't think that they deserve it. They don't understand what the problems are, especially people who didn't attend post-secondary or like more like really particular like a 4-year university degree. Are not incapable, but like quite insecure about how much knowledge they have and like have a perception that they don't know everything and that they aren't equipped to discuss certain issues. And that's something that I've had to sort of tackle with like friends of mine and other people in that space. So with being too radical. Like for like sort of like my example before, like if I had said like, no, like it's important that like we don't engage with farmers so that we can have this relationship with this like city-based charity or like nonprofit organization, people would have just walked away, and I wouldn't have had people to organize with, and I would have like lost those relationships, that connection. Those people wouldn't have wanted to continue to work with me, and they would speak poorly of me to other people that, oh, like Payton had some great ideas, but at the end of the day, she was like immovable, and we weren't ready for the type of action that she wanted to do, and that's not the point. The point is to sort of make people feel comfortable. I really love thinking about organizing in like sports terms, that like a lot of like the actions that we do are like scrimmages for one day when it's like for real, and like there's like the big thing. So for me, like it wasn't actually like a loss to not have that. Like I understood the concessions that needed to be made in order for everyone to practice the skills that we needed to learn in doing those actions, and gaining that confidence that you can like block down a street in a small town where there's never been a rally before, and do a rally, and people will show up and they'll be excited about it. So those are the type of things that, you know, moving too fast, you risk like losing everything basically, or having to become, or being back at square one in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, would you like to comment on this? Or we could go back to the question about your relationship to power holders in the community.
Yeah, I think it may be better for me to go back to the original question, just
Of course,
because,
yeah.
yeah, so in my work at Climate Caucus, we work with locally elected officials across the country. The majority of our members are rural because, of course, in Canada, the majority of communities are small and rural. So it's probably helpful for me to answer from that perspective a little bit more than the other one. But I think what I'll say will hopefully touch on everything, and it'll maybe throw an interesting twist on things. So with the locally elected officials, they obviously have a lot of power at the local level, and they decide on quite a lot of things. And so at Climate Caucus, we don't advocate to them to do things. We support them in the work that they're doing. But from that, we have gained a bit of an understanding of really what works and what drives things in local communities. So I often say that in order to drive climate action or anything forward, you really need a trifecta. So you need a staff champion, you need a local government elected official champion, and you need people on the ground who are willing to drive this work forward and to support it. And so I think a lot of the folks here today are the people on the ground, and your role is really, really critical because, you know, you'll support people getting elected, and then a lot of the time they feel like they're sort of dropped off or they don't have support anymore once they are trying to actually do the work that you've elected them to do. And so building the relationship with your local councillor is also really, really critical to get anything to happen that's in the local government jurisdiction. So I think that sort of relates to what everybody else is saying as well about relationships and not moving too fast, because if they trust you, then they're going to be a lot more willing to do what you're asking them to do, and they'll be on your side. So often I say the most important thing that you need to do first is you need to sort of identify who's your climate champion. That may be someone that you help get elected originally. It may be someone that's, you know, in the middle of their term and you notice they're doing some green voting. And you want to reach out and start to build that relationship with them and show them that you can be someone who is going to support them, who's going to show up, who's going to fill their inboxes when there's a difficult decision, and who's going to flood council chambers when there's another difficult decision. And once you build that relationship, they'll be able to tell you when that needs to happen, and when they'll need that support, and you can start showing up for them, and then they'll trust you, and then they'll be willing to do things for you as well. So I do have a couple of examples of where we've seen this work really well. They're not super rural, but that's okay. So one is the city of Nanaimo. So Nanaimo's on Vancouver Island. Their council has a really, really good relationship with their citizen groups on the ground. They can count on them regularly to show up when they're needed. And they're, as a result, one of the sort of leading local governments in the country on a lot of things. So recently, in the throughout the fall, they were implementing this zero carbon step code for new buildings, which is something that the province released it's going to be mandatory for Canadian communities or for BC communities in 2030, but there is an option for municipalities to adopt it early. So Nanaimo was one of the first ones to step up and say, hey, we want to adopt this now. So it's not removing all fossil fuels from new buildings, but pretty much. So you can't use it for heating or cooking. And so you could use fossil fuels for like fireplaces, for example. And that would be in new builds. And so throughout the entire process of sort of studying what this would look like, various council motions, they received a lot of pushback from industry, from fireplace industry. Also, the Alberta War Room was running a campaign to try and get them to not put this through. But they ultimately had way more emails and way more support in favor than they did against, even though there was all of this organizing to try and stop them. And the reason why they had that was because they were able to rely on their community members that they have good relationships with to flood inboxes when it was needed. They do ultimately do accounting. They say this many yays, this many nays, and that's how they help make their decision. So that's happened multiple times in Nanaimo. They ultimately got it through. And now since then, there's about 20 more municipalities that are following the lead, which is great. Another quick example is that we just learned about it today in Kelowna. We had a really active citizen in Kelowna who comes to a lot of our calls and workshops, and she learned about a program in Duncan that the mayor of Duncan was speaking about, where they have a tiny house community for people experiencing homelessness. And so she has a really good relationship with one of the counselors on her council. And so she invited him to see the webinar, and then he chatted about it with his mayor, and the mayor eventually liked it and ran with the idea. And now they have just announced a facility of 60 tiny homes for people experiencing homelessness in Kelowna. So these are all things that happen because of the relationships and because council is able to rely on people in the community, and the people in the community are there to support as things are getting through, and they're not dropping off when it gets difficult. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, beautiful. I appreciate that. Would anybody like to comment either on what Alex just said or on the question of reputation? And then we can move to the next question after that. We're good? Okay. So yeah, this next question kind of follows up on also that question of like reputation and the how fragile it could be to bring up this subject. It's about narrative, and I noticed, Margaret, you talk a lot about narrative as well. You use words like the billionaire foreign investor and stuff like that. You're like very powerful narratives right there. So I'll have you speak on this question first, and I'll translate it in French. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it's it's okay.
What's
Yeah,
the
breathe
question?
in, breathe out. Here, I'll say
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to talk about climate in conjunction with other issues. And I'll give you an example
Okay.
after this. What angle of climate has resonated most when organizing your community? And how has that intersection included considerations of marginalized communities in your area? So one example could be, for example, when I bring it up in my small community, I often talk about preserving land and having healthy land for farmers. It's the easiest way to bring up like the greater question of climate change without ever saying the words climate change. I'll talk about better yields on a long-term basis, and offering that land to your family afterwards. And that's an effective way of bringing the question up. So I'll translate that, and then it'll give you a bit of time to think, Margaret, and then I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. Je vais la traduire la question en français. On parlait tout précédemment là, de l'importance de la réputation dans les petits villages ou en petites communautés. Et donc, qu'il faut être sensible au narratif qu'on essaie d'apporter pour convaincre les gens. La question 3 est connectée. Ça dit que des fois, il est plus facile de parler de la crise climatique quand on parle en conjonction à un autre sujet. Je donnais l'exemple de l'agriculture, par exemple. Quand je suis dans mon petit village, moi, je parle souvent de la qualité des sols, puis d'avoir des meilleurs rendements sur les terres à long terme. Je parle comme ça quand je parle aux fermiers. Je ne mentionne même pas le mot crise climatique. Puis je reste seulement sur ces sujets-là. Puis c'est une meilleure façon d'amener le sujet. Fait qu'on demande aux panélistes, y a-t-il une façon ou une conjonction que vous apportez qui marche bien dans votre communauté? Puis comment est-ce qu'elle fait pour ensuite mieux intégrer les intérêts des communautés marginalisées qui sont dans la communauté? So that was the translation. Margaret, I'll send it off to you. Again, you could just pass it on to somebody else if you want. There's no obligation.
No, I'll take a stab. Okay. Thanks. Where I went in my mind when you were asking the question was what struck me when you said, how you talk about without saying climate, without talking about climate change. And I think the way we talked about it was a love of nature and the sort of health benefits of spending time in nature. You know, that was one of the ways, like, so it would be environment and health, or environment and wellness, right? And I think we also talked about it in terms of, let's brand because there was all this talk about, you know, we need to brand ourselves as this and that, and we need to get on this sort of bandwagon of this Inverness County becoming a elite golf center for the world and all that, one of the 50 top golf destinations in the world. And so we were kind of saying, well, why don't we brand the biodiversity that exists in the park? And it just so happens that in conjunction with our campaign, CPAWS did 2 studies in the park. And so they're able to document that it had 18 rare and endangered species in this one little park, and that it had more biodiversity than almost any other place in Nova Scotia, which was pretty amazing, which we didn't, in one of my letters, I said, we all knew West Malibu Beach was special, but we didn't know it was this special, you know? So let's brand this. Let's brand the biodiversity, and let's, you know, as a matter of fact, you know, ecotourism brings way more money into the economy of Cape Breton than golf, like way, way, way more, right? So that was one of the ways that we talked about it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, the economic question and the intersection between climate and again, economics, of course,
And health and wellness. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, sorry,
there were
go
so
ahead,
many.
Sam.
I'm just thinking because there were so many stories that were being told throughout this campaign. Like storytelling was like central, I would say, to the campaign, and I mean not just for us, but also for the golf course folks as well. Like they are also telling a story as well, right? And it almost like became this battle of the stories, you know. And I would say, and I mean for us, and this is in no way like fabrication, like this is very real, but you know the park it was so much more than just, I mean it just represents so much, like it's people's identity, you know, it's people's culture, it's people's history, it's people. So um yeah, so ultimately I think for us, like a lot of the campaign was rooted in the love of a place and what that place means to the people there.
Mm. So
Yeah.
yeah, like awaken that attachment that people could have to it. And yeah,
Yeah,
storytelling is such a powerful tool for that, right?
definitely. And
Yeah.
for and like I said, you know, for also because I mean the golf developers also ran a campaign, you know,
Yeah.
their own campaign, right? And you
Mhm.
know, they also have a story to tell. So
Yeah, about how
And we
great it's gonna
did,
feel to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, we did a lot about playing up what an amazing natural environment park this is. And, you know, one of our weekly things that we did on our Facebook page was we did a series on the inhabitants in the park. And it really was incredible. Like it was just endless, the things that we were coming up with in terms of what was there, you know? And there was just so much, there was such a spirit of awe. You know, it was like, this is an amazing place. This is
mm,
such a resource, you know, and we would use language like that in terms of, this is a natural resource, you know, it's free, it doesn't need to be developed, it's not taking any tax money, you know, it's open all year round, it's accessible to everybody, you know, as opposed to an elite golf course that people jet into from all around the world, you know, and jet out of, you know, after they have their 18 rounds, or is that what it is, 18 holes, whatever. After they have their game of golf. I'll stop.
I love that. Thank you. Alex or Peyton, anybody want to follow up?
Yeah, I can jump in. So yeah, again, from this perspective of working with like locally elected officials, sort of a weird angle that, because I was thinking about this question, I wasn't really sure what the best approach was. So kind of the weird angle that we've been using lately is around infrastructure. So, you know, most of the country was built around a similar time. A lot of the infrastructure in a lot of these communities, is all failing at the moment, and local governments are constantly complaining about the fact that they are in these millions, billions of dollars of infrastructure deficit that they're never ever going to have enough money to be able to fix, and they don't know what to do, and that's like the head of their problem essentially. So we try to sort of come in there and like throw climate in as part of the solution to that, because it's sort of our backdoor way of saying, oh, hey, you could do multi-solving, and then you can deal with issues around affordability, you can deal with your failing infrastructure, you can increase your biodiversity, and you can be dealing with climate issues all at once. So at the same time, a lot of communities are experiencing these population booms, which you're all in small and rural communities, you may have noticed. Folks are trickling in from places like Vancouver and Toronto to try and find more affordable places to live. They're able to work remotely. And with that comes the need for more houses. So there's a huge housing shortage. And even when the federal government is providing the houses, they're not providing the servicing for those houses. So they still need roads and schools, and they need streetlights, and they need sewers, and all of those things that need to come with it. And so it's really putting a crunch on the local governments, especially in these small and rural communities. But that being said, climate, like adaptation and mitigation, can also provide really cool ways of dealing with those things that are maybe not using great infrastructure or not going first to great infrastructure. And that's able to lead to huge cost savings and things like that. So trying to encourage local governments to use a bit of a climate lens on things. For example, can you use green infrastructure? Can you maybe return your river to its natural meandering pattern instead of building a dike? Can you do some sort of like bioswales or things like that to deal with your floodwater? Can you increase biodiversity? All of these questions are things that need to be sort of top of mind for local governments, and it's different from the way that they've been dealing with infrastructure up until now. Yeah, I'd say the last thing I'll say on this is, especially for small and rural communities, climate disaster is a huge risk. Almost every local councillor that we've chatted with from small and rural communities are really, really concerned about something happening, and they're all sort of on the brink of, you know, a flood or a fire or a landslide or something like that. So it's a really good gateway to a larger conversation about climate and sort of getting them hooked in, and then seeing where they can kind of go from there. And especially if you're able to do this multi-solving approach where you're looking at, okay, we're doing adaptation, but we're also going to sneak in a couple of other things because why not? Then it makes it a lot easier to try and get stuff through and to sort of bring people onto your side. So yeah, infrastructure.
Yeah, I like how it's basically common sense that you're sort of sliding underneath the pretext of infrastructure. And you were saying that, because I love that too. I noticed that a lot in Quebec, that the fear of like climate disasters is very real in regions like a lot of forest fires and floods and stuff like that. And you use that sort of notion of adaptation to bring in mitigation. If you can, and if you feel comfortable, how do you make that bridge? Because it isn't that easy. And I've noticed a few people sort of block my way when I brought that argument up. What has worked in the past? We can come back to you after if you want, but if you have an idea right now, I'll send you the mic.
Yeah, we do have one. I have one sort of our board chair tries to make the bridge all of the time when we're talking with certain people, and he basically talks about the fact that you know, if you still have to do whatever you can to try and mitigate those the extreme weather and the extreme climate events. And as much as it's coming now and people are sort of looking at adaptation, it's going to just continue to get worse if you don't start to get rid of it. So if you have already sort of committed to the fact that you're going to need to be making these changes and that is going to be getting worse, then you may as well also do some things that are going to, you know, cost you less. Like he talks a lot about, you know, the EVs in their communities, and they've decided to move over to EVs there in Courtenay, BC, because they did a big life cycle analysis and it turned out that it was going to be a lot more affordable. If you're looking at solar panels, it's going to be a lot more affordable. If you're looking at something like heat pumps, in a lot of communities where heat pumps work really well, that's both adaptation, so you can keep your windows closed and keep your house cool with the smoke out. And it's also going to be mitigation. So he sort of says to start with these things, look at the low-hanging fruit that's doing a little bit of everything, and that's actually going to cost you less in your community, before you start looking to all of the other like big things. Because often the argument is sort of like, I have $1, what do I spend the $1 dollar on. I'm going to spend it on adaptation, not mitigation. So trying to do these multi-solving things is sort of the way in, I would say. And then just reminding people that like it is going to continue to get worse if we're not, maybe even not using the word mitigating climate, but talk about like trying to mitigate the extreme weather events or the frequency of them and focus on what's actually happening instead of just like the amorphous GHG emissions. Yeah.
I have nothing to add to that. That was a perfect answer. Payton, would you like to address that question?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many. I find with climate in particular, there's so many different angles to come at it from because it is such like an all-encompassing issue. And when I'm engaging with people, I try and sort of like give them an idea of like who I am and what I do so that they're not, you know, thrown off once I start talking to them about politics. But also sort of like make sure to be asking them questions to sort of align like how I'm going to bring up climate with the things that they're telling me that they care about. So that I try to avoid disagreeing with people as much as possible. So I use a lot of like yes and statements. So like acknowledge what they said, find like, even if it's like the smallest little piece of truth in what they said, like the government sucks. Be like, yeah, the government does suck. And you know what else they suck at? Like climate, environment, like all of these things. I think that Alex's point on sort of like infrastructure, it resonates a lot with me. That's something that comes up quite frequently in conversations because a lot of the work that we do in Haldimand is in solidarity with 1492 Land Back Lane. So I think it's hard. I think it's like really hard to imagine like how like central that occupation is in the community. Like a lot of like indigenous land reclamations are like far away from where settlements are. This is like in the middle of town. Like it is a conflict over a housing development, like on like just off to the side of like the most frequently driven on highway. It's like a major trade route. So it is like super disruptive. Like when they are actively protesting, like it is like everyone knows it. Everybody's taking a different route to work. It's a pretty all-encompassing thing, and having conversations with people about like why, like, yeah, sure, it like really sucks that it takes you an extra 20 minutes to get to work while this is going on, but sort of like blame shifting towards the government and talking about things like, you know, like maybe you don't understand sort of like the complexities of like the politics of the land claim, but what you can understand is that we don't have the infrastructure for 20,000 more people in this community. And whether or not you agree that Six Nations should get this land, like you have to agree that we can't have that influx of people right now, especially with the amount of planning that has gone into it. So sort of finding those like other avenues to like find common ground with people and make those alignments is really important, even if you have to bite your tongue on a couple of things that you're saying, just so that you're not like as soon as you're disagreeing with somebody, they completely shut down. They're ready to argue with you. They like you're not going to get out of that sort of like contrarian dialogue with them. So I just find that really important. And I feel bad that I don't have like a super strong climate example, because so much of the work that we've done is sort of on more of like the justice aspect of climate justice. However, the other element that I have found like a lot of success in talking to people, and this is more like longer form conversations with folks, is bringing in the health piece, because we're a fossil fuel community and we have so much proximity to industry. People like you can start like really being like, yo, like, have you noticed that everybody in Selkirk like is like dying of cancer? Like, like have you also noticed that? And you can kind of find alignment with people on these things, because we don't have much research into our communities, because you know there's not very many people, or the research that is done includes like such a huge geographic area in order to meet, you know, like the minimum requirement of like 100,000 people is like typically sort of like a survey group that people will do. So it can alter data in a way that like diminishes the impact of people who are like most close to these industries, that being natural gas, a diesel refinery, and steel mill, which is like steel mills cause like a lot of pollution. They're still powered by coal, so we still have sort of like much less than before, but we still have coal being burned in the community. And then we also have gravel mining, which like the dust from that causes like a lot of like lung issues for folks that are like completely irreversible. So sort of like talking to people about like all these different things that impact our health. And then they're sort of like, oh, like I thought I had these problems because I smoked cigarettes. And it's like, yeah, but you're like 23. So like, even if you smoked a ton of cigarettes, like baby boomers were smoking from the time they were like 8 years old until they were like 60 and not getting lung cancer until they were 60. So it is, you know, shocking to have people who are as young as I am and as my peers are, to be experiencing those kinds of health challenges and losing parents quite young and all these things that, you know, people are able to connect with that. However, it's like, because like I said before, it is like, it's speculation because we don't have those studies. Part of like what I'm like trying to sort of move into is like doing a community-based study, similar to what like Amjwang First Nation did in Chemical Valley and Sarnia, because I think that equipping people with that knowledge, so you can really say to people like, no, like we have proof that it's not because you are smoking like res cigarettes, that that you're having these severe health problems. Like, sure, that doesn't help, but it is compounded by all of these like severe industrial pollutants that are impacting your life, the lives of your children, and will limit your ability to sort of, you know, be on this earth and be with your family. So those are sort of the angles that I have found resonate with people most, and really just like speaking poorly about the government and like aligning with them that you don't like Trudeau is like the best way to get people like opening with like, I hate Trudeau. I know that we can have that in common. And sort of moving from there, I have found a lot of success in, because there's a perception that every sort of like liberal environmentalist person is like waving the flag for the Liberal Party and for Trudeau in particular. So it's a bit of a disarming way to engage with people that I found some success in.
Thank you, Payton, so much for that. Yeah, I feel like health is probably a universal value that any side of the political spectrum could agree on. Yeah, I also thought about a few examples. I don't know if you remember, Payton, but the LNG project in Quebec, liquefied natural gas pipeline that was supposed to go through a bunch of different communities, including Indigenous communities. Because the question did have like, how could we change the narrative to adapt, right, and not be alienated, but how do we also change it to gain more allies? If you talk about health instead of talking purely about, you know, climate policy, well, then you might gain allies in the health sector. The same thing goes for infrastructure. And Margaret and Sivan, when you guys talked about changing that narrative, it isn't just to sort of be labeled climate kooks, but it's also to gain allies that might not be on your side in the whole like climate policy, international kind of stuff, but they care about that park now because they had memories attached to it, right? And so this pipeline in Quebec that was going through communities, I remember one of the discourse or arguments we used to use was the question of like lack of consultation, and like the project was going through without almost any consent in the communities that were locally there. And so when we talk about people like, yo, whether you're against it or not, you have to admit that having a pipeline go through, changing so much about the land, if that is going to happen, they should at least consult people. They should at least get the opinions of the people on the ground. And that sort of opened this whole new discussion about consultation with Indigenous communities in Quebec. And it brought people that knew subject to it, and it made people realize that, you know, it wasn't just a you know, an issue that concerned non-Indigenous people. So that way of like sort of switching around narrative and including different aspects to it, you know, moving away from the strictly climate policy angle of things, is a nice way to be more inclusive. It also makes your movement stronger because, you know, you're allowing more allies to be part of it. So yeah, it's a very very important thing. So on that note, yeah,
Do you
sorry.
mind? So I'm just thinking, do you mind if I just read a quote out, because
Of
it's
course.
really pertinent, and it's something I read recently. It's Naomi Klein, but I actually read it in a book about Wendell Berry, and I think it really resonates because we were talking about, not to sound more granola crunching than I already am, but just about love being
I love it already.
the you know, the fuel on the engine that that, you know, just drives people to act. So the quote is, the power of this ferocious love is what resource companies and their advocates in government inevitably underestimate, precisely because no amount of money can extinguish it. when what is being fought for is an identity, a culture, a beloved place that people are determined to pass on to their grandchildren, there is nothing companies can offer as a bargaining chip. So that's, I mean, for us, that's the park. Like that's what the park is, you know? So that just really resonated with me. And another thing, this is Wendell Berry who said that love is in the particular, right? So it's hard to it's hard to love just some amorphous kind of concept, but a park, that's you know, right? And just talking about rural communities, you know, these are, there's such a familiarity there, right? That's not saying you can't like cultivate love in an urban setting. Do you know what I mean? But
Absolutely, yeah.
but y'all get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Of course.
I hope that resonated.
It did with me for sure. Yeah, the importance of like memories and making it personal and a little more intimate. It plays so much into it. And that's like sort of, again, beyond the political spectrum. It's about humanity more generally.
It's kind of
So-
like writing about what you know, the saying, write about what you know. And when we partnered with Ecology Action Center and CPAWS, like they were always so like, we want to hear from the people who walk the trails and walk the beach. Like we want to know, because you kind of have the authentic experience of this place, right? There was a lot of emphasis on that, which I appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll go to question 4, which I find it's interesting because we're trying to make that bridge between the rural or suburban sort of climate culture and then tie it to a more urban setting. So it goes like this. What have you found to be the challenges and barriers to organizing in a smaller and more rural communities? We talked about a few already. And how do you think this can be better reflected in the broader climate movement? I'll translate it and then I'll pick somebody at random. Donc, la question 4 pour tout le monde qui écoute en français. Qu'est-ce qui a été un défi ou un obstacle que vous avez rencontré alors que vous essayez d'organiser votre communauté? On a parlé de quelques exemples déjà. Puis la deuxième partie de la question dit puis comment est-ce qu'on peut utiliser les leçons apprises par ces expériences, puis l'appliquer au mouvement large de l'écologie dans les milieux urbains, tant que, mettons, le milieu international aussi. So there goes translation. Do I have somebody who volunteers right away? How could the lessons be applied more universally, even in urban settings? Funny, because we just talked about, yes, go ahead.
I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Margaret and I, we were talking about this earlier. I mean, just like throwing ideas out there. I think like in the background of the entire camp, or not, I shouldn't say the background, like this was the foundation of the entire campaign was social cohesion, because that in rural communities, that's just like the constant consideration is, at least I felt this was social cohesion, and just respect and finding common ground. And I think, I mean, at least what I've seen, sometimes in more urban settings and perhaps in larger movements, because there isn't that kind of, you're not necessarily engaging with a bunch of people that like you're going to see on a day, like every single day. It's easy to kind of lose that prioritization of social cohesion and respect. So perhaps that's something. I don't know. What do people think about that? I'm just putting that idea out there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sivan. In a lot of ways, when I sort of try to describe rural organizing to people, it's like you can't cancel people who like live across the street from you. Like it's just like not like obviously if people have like severe behavior, like you remove them from your organizing spaces, but just like not getting along with somebody saying something off color like once or even 3 times or however, like these things can't necessarily be grounds to ask them to leave the space or to like isolate them and like not include them in things, because like you only have so many people who are there, first of all, and then of that there's only a small percentage of people who are willing to engage. And of that, there's only a small percent of people who have the time and capacity to regularly show up. So you really need to grow those relationships and try and learn with people and be understanding of their perspective, and that, you know, lots of like people have problematic takes, and sometimes you have to like just take that with the good and work on ways to sort of shift their perspective if that's something that you have the ability to do. But I think it's a really different experience being in rural communities than in urban ones. And also, like, when I was trying to sort of like run campaigns, I was DMing everyone who I went to school with on Instagram and saying, hey, like, you liked my Instagram story this one time when I posted about climate. And so actually I wrote you down in my notes app as someone who I might be able to reach out to later on.
Yeah.
And you end up with these, you know, kind of interesting connections. Like one of the people who I organize like the most closely with is like the ex of like one of my friends from high school, and like I didn't even know them when we were in high school, but because we followed each other online and our values aligned, we were able to start organizing together, and now we just sort of spend a lot of time together doing that. You know, and I never would have imagined that, you know, when I had met them when we were going to public school together. So it's quite interesting in that sense. When I was reading this question, the main thing that I have really found challenging is not having third spaces to organize in. When I was in the student movement, I had like all the meetings that we had were at like the student like cooperative, like progressive cafe, or sort of like the student like bar restaurant. Or just like random hallways on campus that you can go and meet in and, you know, have food, have a little drink, have nothing if you don't want anything. So sort of like having that flexibility of the space, and not needing to book it in advance, that you could just like make a planned day of like, we're going to meet here, we're going to be there, we're allowed to be there, like it's fine. And that's something I've really struggled with finding. Where I live, just because most common spaces, they're like church basements, they're like government buildings, or they're just like outdoor spaces. So because we don't have like, we're just like not coordinated enough that I could like book a room like 2 weeks in advance on like the schedule that like these places want me to book spaces, that like everybody would be able to like tell me a date and time and like actually be there, and that we wouldn't need to have like any sort of like flexibility with that. So a lot of my organizing has actually been restricted to summer months. So it's almost like a season, that from like May, June until September, October, we're able to, you know, do a lot of organizing and community building. And we primarily do that in outdoor spaces. Did a really beautiful sort of like community bonfire series where we talked about like bias and different sort of interpretations of how different community issues impacted different people, and these like really beautiful group conversations. And we had land defenders come and speak to young people and like do this, you know, roast marshmallows, and it was really cute. But you know, you can only do that so many times in one season that people have time for, right? So you know, we were able to have like maybe 3 or 4 meetings in a summer, and then it's kind of a blackout in the winter months, with people just being so busy. And another challenge with like, especially sort of like the youth perspective in organizing, is that there is a lot of young parents, and their capacity is greatly reduced. So even though like they might like be really passionate or care, you just don't have the same capacity when you have a young one, especially when you have to drive 20 minutes to get to like each sort of location that you're in. It takes quite a bit of time out of your day. So yeah, I would say those are sort of like the main challenges. I wouldn't call the sort of like community aspect a barrier. It's an interesting challenge that like can make things move a bit slower, because you don't just have sort of like a pool of aligned people on a campus who, you know, are studying the thing that you're organizing around and want to put it on their CVs or their grad school applications and things like that. People have other motivations to participate that aren't just altruism when you're in these campus spaces or even some of these urban spaces. But you really have to get people who are sort of based in altruism when you're doing this like rural and remote organizing, and that's honestly difficult to find, right? And there's not a lot of opportunity to make income off of that kind of work.
Interesting what you say about third spaces. Yeah, but conversely, I think actually a big strength with our campaign at least is um, we were a pretty varied group. I mean, in terms of our ages and
Mm,
backgrounds, and it kind and that was a huge strength, honestly, that people that we like just out of necessity, it was this like really very, pretty varied group of people. But people then just came with different strengths and different perspectives.
mhm.
Yeah, there was a positive there for sure.
Yeah. What about Alex and Margaret? Would you like to say something about the lessons that you learn in the countryside or in rural settings and how they can be applied to urban settings?
Sure.
By all means.
Okay. Okay. I just went. I'll go, and then Alex, you can go. Yeah, just to pick up on what Savannah was saying, in my experience, the challenge was just garnering support, like vocal support, people who were willing to take a stand and say where they stood on the issue. So many people that we knew were supportive were still really hesitant to put up a lawn sign or just be public about where they stood. And initially that was really puzzling to me. And, as Savannah was saying, the more I thought about it, I just realized that in rural communities, compared to urban communities, you just, rely on each other way more. They're volunteer based. And I really began to understand and appreciate that folks were reluctant to take a stand because it might offend their neighbors or their friends or their family or their employer or their landlord, whom they had to rely on in various scenarios, whether it was the volunteer firefighters or the volunteer first responders or the volunteer coaches or the volunteer communities that come together to plan the village summer festival, right? It's so volunteer based. So there was like this polite social convention that we're just not going to talk about it. We're just not going to talk about it. So how do you talk about it when no one wants to talk about it? And when you understand why, when you like, they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to offend their neighbor who's gonna, dig them out of the snowbank when they go off the road, right?
Mm.
Or who's gonna come rushing in and take their kid out of a fire. It's like, okay, I get that, right? So as a seasonal resident, I began to realize I could sort of say things in my letters to the editor, and I wrote a lot of them, that I think well, people told me they agreed with, but they weren't going to say it, right? So I just thought that was interesting. And after the fact, again, I heard anecdotally mainly that a lot of people were like, oh, we're so relieved, it was safe to after it was denied and it was a done deal, then it was safe to say, yeah, I didn't want that. But when it was happening, it wasn't being
Mm.
vocalized. And in terms of how to generalize from that, it's just that whole question of polarization and how we have conversations, speak about difficult things, and diverse topics respectfully. I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly a very real topic today. How do we come together and talk in ways that are like as Payton was saying, you can't cancel the person that lives, the person that lives across the street or whatever. So how do we have those? I don't have the answer, but I think it's a great question. How do we have those difficult conversations when we're really polarized around issues?
Thank you for that. I'll send it to Alex, and then we could maybe ask one last question. Hope if we have time, and we could take questions from the audience. So feel free to text your questions in the chat if you have some. Sentez-vous libre de mettre les questions dans le chat si vous en avez en préparation à la session de questions. Go ahead, Alex.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, I have a few thoughts on this. So obviously, some of the major barriers are, like everyone was saying, around the fact that it's a small communities and the fact that everybody knows each other, so they don't want to sort of stick their necks out for things just in case. Also, local governments, if you're wanting to do organizing at the local government level, they severely lack capacity and like staff capacity and fiscal capacity, especially in rural and small communities. So I'll probably touch on both of those things. In terms of capacity, they really, really need support of the community members to be able to get things done in small and rural communities. I sort of mentioned like showing up at council chambers and things like that, but that can go to another level. Places where things are going really well, where they're able to do a lot of climate action, they have citizen climate committees who are willing to show up and help actually do the work. Like they do the research and they help write the plans and they help make the decisions, because ultimately it would just fall on the councillors, or they don't have enough, like they often have one or two staff. So these citizen climate committees and things like that really help. And we did have a counselor said to me today that your council is a really diverse representation. They represent everybody in the community. So while he said my fellow counselor is probably not someone I'll invite for dinner, but they probably represent someone in the community. And so keeping that in mind is that sometimes counselors feel really lonely when they're standing up for green things. And so if they know that you are the community, you're the part of the community, the pie that they represent, they'll be more confident in standing up and being able to make those votes and make those decisions that are the things that you want to see. And local government's beneficial compared to other levels of government because there's not so much like party politics or anything like that involved. It is your neighbor, it is your person who who you can go and chat with and have a coffee with, who's also going to be representing you and making those decisions. So try to keep that in mind. And then I'll talk a little bit about trust and community engagement. So we did see there was a lot of repercussions during the pandemic, especially in rural and small communities, around moving too quickly and doing things without gaining the trust and of the community. And so I just have noticed that deep engagement is going to be really, really important from the council out to the community in order to get anything done. And I mean, the community members can help on that obviously too, by standing up and saying what you want and sharing your voice and everything, and encouraging council to be able to do that. So yeah, we've seen some really good examples in places like, if you're interested, the District of Souk has used this storytelling technique to do really deep engagement with the community to develop their climate plans. So they did a variety of different techniques to get information and input from the city and from the community, and then they developed a climate plan as a story. So it says they go from sort of point A to point B, where they have, and at the end of the story, they have this future community that everybody wants, that everybody can see themselves in. And that has really helped them to be able to actually implement the climate actions, even though it took a little while to do the engagement and to do everything at the beginning. And they're doing various surveys and things as they go along. But as I said, like, climate can be just such an amorphous thing. And so if you're working on a climate plan, or, you're doing a carbon tax or whatever it is, like, that's something that's not tangible. It's sort of like you were saying about the fact that love is something that you have to know, or whatever it was that you were saying, that it has to be, that it's something in the tangible. And so climate is not tangible. GHG emissions are not tangible. But if you're using a story to sort of go from the beginning to the end, then people can see, they see their health in there. They see the lake being protected. They see that they're going to be able to walk or wheel safely around the community. And so being able to put those things into your climate story makes it a lot easier to actually then do the actions and do the implementation, and you're not getting fighting for every single item along the way. So yeah, I think that's all I'll say on that. Thanks.
No, I love that. Thank you so much. I'll ask really quick to Hope and Sarah. Should we open the questions right away?
Yeah, I think we can open them and then see if there are more, and then if there are more, we have the extra supplemental ones.
Awesome. So I see we have one in the chat right now, but we're also going to say, if you we're going to go with the hand thing, right? Hope, if anybody has a question. Oh no, it's purely written.
We can do
Okay,
either,
purely
but
written.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's a question here from Bob Garton. It goes, how can we best serve people in our community who need support before they can focus on other matters? So I think it might be, like, in a sense, how do we prioritize climate before we go onto other subjects, if we can? It's a difficult subject because it could be questions of housing and stuff like that. And so how do we keep climate, relevant? I'm just gonna translate it and then we could answer that question. I'll open it up to you guys. Donc, bonjour tout le monde. On est à la période de questions. Si vous avez des questions à mettre, n'hésitez pas à les écrire dans le chat. Sinon, on peut les prendre de vive voix aussi si c'est ce que vous préférez. Il y a une première question dans le chat qui dit comment est-ce qu'on fait pour acquérir le support des gens de la communauté qui pourraient peut-être avoir d'autres priorités? Puis j'ai suscité l'exemple de l'hébergement, comme que des fois, il y a d'autres questions pressantes. Puis comment est-ce qu'on fait pour garder le climat comme une question qui est d'actualité? So back to English now. This is a tough question. I don't know if anyone wants to take a whack at it right now. No, it's a tough one.
I'm happy to answer this one to the best I can. I mean, I had mentioned earlier that a lot of the organizing that I've done, it has ended up sort of focusing on those like immediate sort of like justice-centered concerns, even though like my background's in climate organizing, like I haven't done any organizing around the industrial park in my area because there's other things that are like more immediate, like migrant workers suffering right now, a land claim that is facing police violence right now. And things right now like the affordability crisis and other elements like that can lend to a lot of challenges. I think that's a really great place to look to for inspiration is like Southern United States and the type of community organizing that they do, which is like a lot of like really powerful like mutual aid based work. So for example, one of my good friends, she lives in Kentucky. I'm actually in Kentucky right now visiting with her. And throughout the pandemic, she started basically like a food service organization where they prepare hot meals and deliver them to folks who are living on the street. And this has been like a really great way for them to start connecting like food sovereignty and issues of food systems to sort of like the more broad climate things, while also like conservatives love giving out food to people. Like that's like the #1 act of charity that is like pretty uncontroversial and making things immediate. Like it sets a stage for a common ground and it gives opportunity to practice skills like I was sort of describing before. And then those skills can be leveraged when sort of like the big environmental thing happens, right? So I think it's important to like recognize that those needs are there, see in what ways you can use community organizing to address those needs, either through mutual aid, either through direct advocacy about housing affordability, what have you. And then sort of like building from there, like how can we bring climate into these conversations rather than starting from climate and then bringing in the more material things, because a lot of people who aren't sort of like climate ideologues, like I think most of us here are, they just don't care, right? They don't see the point, and you can bring them in with the things that they care about and the things that they need, because it goes beyond care when it's a need, right? And then bring in why this policy is about to pass in council and it will have these negative impacts, which will limit your ability to access housing because they want to build housing in this zone that is going to be like really susceptible to floods or fires or anything else of that sort of nature is how I would recommend going about that.
Yeah, very good answer. Does anybody else have something to say to Bob's question?
Yeah, I can
think-
jump in. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead.
No, just to think, I think you really said it, Payton, when you were talking about connecting it to the immediate needs. That just resonated. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
No worries. No, I agree. I think that you starting with the things that people are dealing with and that's top of mind, and then sort of adding climate or putting a climate lens on it is often the way that we go about it. The thing with climate that you kind of have to remember as an organizer is that climate change is sort of a threat multiplier. So these things that people are already experiencing, and when climate impacts come in, it is going to make it worse. So I think that it's hard to not like you can't just ignore it and just focus on something else. But the other thing is that a lot of the time again, climate is just this big thing that we're talking about, but if you really bring it down to the tangible, you can see how it actually is related to these individual things that people are working on. And so you are that are sort of the most pressing matters for people. And so I think the best approach, or what we often talk to our like counselors that we're working with about, is putting a climate lens on your decision making. So if you're building your affordable housing, as much as you need to have housing as quickly as possible, and something that we're really seeing happen right now is that they're just putting up housing as quickly as they can, but they're ultimately going to need to be retrofitting all of these buildings. They're not really, they're, you know, just barely meeting building code standards. People are going to be having like air leaking through their homes. They're going to be cold. It's going to cost extra to keep them warm or cool. They may not even have cooling. So all of these things do need to be considered, and there are ultimately ways to build more affordably and with, you know, a sustainable building that will be, you know, last for the next sort of 50 years and have all of the things that you need, so it's climate friendly and affordable. But you do have to work a little harder to find those solutions. So but yeah, so I think that's what I would suggest, is looking for, again, multi-solving and trying to throw a climate lens on things and see if there are places where you can fit climate in, and if not, then pressing matters are pressing matters, so you can't really ignore them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I might go to Paul's first question, then come back to Baretha or Barita. I'm sorry if I'm ruining your name. So Paul's first question goes like this. It's a very logistical question, but I feel like it might be very handy for participants today. Where have you found funding to help move your initiatives forward? So maybe any tips or tricks for funding? I'll ask it in French and we can go to you guys. Première question qui est écrite dans le chat, ça vient de Paul, qui demande s'ils ont des conseils pour ce qui est de trouver les fonds nécessaires pour faire avancer les initiatives. Does anybody want to start giving a few tips on funding?
I can start
Yeah.
with the campaign. So the campaign, there was no funding. Kind of. It was complicated. So I mean, it was volunteer. It was volunteer based, except for one part of it, and that was when we connected with the Ecology Action Center, so the EAC, a larger organization based in Halifax. And there was actually another question I think you wanted to ask, just about tying into it was about tying into larger organizations.
Yeah, you could address that.
Yeah, that was invaluable to us, because so getting in touch with them, they helped us procure funds to pay a person for her time and her expertise, which was completely invaluable. And so yeah, I guess the short answer there is just connecting with, like, if you're really grassroots, it's connecting with the larger organizations that have the capacity for this. That was what it was with us.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for addressing that part of the question. It's important. Anybody else on the question of funding? We could do it. We have about 18 minutes left, so we could address this a little more quickly. We have 2 other questions already in the queue.
I will say I also struggle to find funding. I think it's easier if you have like something very specific, like the campaign that Savannah Margaret did. Like that's like a clear ask. You can ask funding for something that's like it's timed, it has like clear goals and things like that. A lot of the time, like the stuff that I've been doing is like, you know, kind of emergent. It's like very like community building oriented and less so like with a clear target and like clear asks. Because we're trying to build up to that. So it's hard to ask for funding for that, because like it's like, oh, like we're gonna have a bonfire, but it's like kind of activism, but like it at the end of the day, it is a bonfire. So it's a bit more challenging to ask for funding for those things, but I have had like a really great privilege of working with a Haudenosaunee-led organization called Protect the Tract, and they have a mission to sort of set up hubs along the Haldimand Tract. So, I mean, if anybody in this call lives along the Grand River in Ontario, they're looking for folks to open hubs to support like Haudenosaunee land stewardship over the land and give some more context, like just sort of like help with like solidarity work there. So they've given us some funds for things like little barbecues that we've done and like potlucks and have provided space to us. So like Savannah said, it's really about like reaching out to groups and like making these partnerships. I act like a crazy freak on social media when I'm engaging with people. I often like to compare myself to like the MLM girls who are like, hey girly, like, do you want to get involved in like this really great opportunity? That's like me with like everybody who I've ever met on Facebook, trying to get sort of, or people who like, I will hear people like on a podcast or on the news, and I will type their name into Facebook, look them up and message them. And that is like a super successful way to get in contact with people, especially if you're like, you're so cool, like everybody loves that. And they often will, you know, if they read the message and see the notification, they'll respond to you and at least give you some direction or guidance. So being like kind of weird and annoying and just reaching out to people, and like not necessarily like if they are affiliated with an organization, like connecting with somebody through Facebook and sort of skipping the line, so to speak, rather than hitting that info at email that like they might have a summer intern monitoring and it might never get anywhere. Yeah, not a straight line to funding, but it's the strategy that seems to work.
Beautiful, thank you. Before I go to, I think this is Paul's second question. Baritha, did you still want to ask your question? I saw that you had your hand up. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
As-
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Actually, I live in the earlier question, I live in Miami, Florida, and one of the people was suggesting about how do you make it relevant, and also the climate anxiety, I think um also ties into this. Is what we try to do is, since I'm from a lot of those communities, I have the perspective of how they think. And when I go in there, making sure that I can connect with what's important to them, as they said earlier. For example, when we tried to explain to them about climate change, nobody was interested. So, so what we did was we turned it around and approached it with something that was relevant to them, and that was hurricane preparedness, because in Miami, that's that's common for us to have hurricanes. So as soon as we approach it with how a hurricane, how having hurricane preparedness will help you in case of a hurricane, and helping them identify that, if they had babies, if they had children, making sure their babies have formula, have food, had everything. So that tugs at every mother's heart, universal around the world. And then, and most of the time, women are the ones who want to make sure their family is okay. So we usually target women. We found out that that is usually the person who's going to make sure everything is okay, and usually the men of the house follow her lead in those situations. But climate anxiety, I used to have it, and the only thing that helped me is knowing that I was prepared. So, like I just said, if it's a hurricane preparedness, one time it came, it caught me. I couldn't get a cold glass of water with ice was all I wanted. Couldn't get it. So what I did was, the next time there was a hurricane, I made sure I had all of my supplies. I had food for days. I had propane. The next morning I was cooking. I knew my family was okay. I knew I didn't have to rush out to the store and face mad people going crazy. So a part of the climate anxiety, it's really nothing you can do with nature, but what you can do is have a plan and be prepared as much as you humanly can be in advance. And even with children, they found out that if you have those headlamps and light, they're afraid of the dark. In a hurricane or most disasters, the lights go out. So just having light for children, helps them out a lot. So just being prepared in advance, having the things you need. And that's pretty much all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it sort of like ties into the question that Paul had in the chat too. So yeah, thank you for that insight. And I wonder if the panelists have anything else to say about climate anxiety. So Aretha talked about how like adaptation and preparedness really helped out. What about you guys?
I think, I mean, I think
Go ahead.
what can help with this feeling of climate anxiety is just you know, the 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 feeling that you have agency in this as well, and like like emphasizing like there are small actions that you, the individual, can do, and exercising those actions. And I think the um like the practice of actually like engaging in action helps you feel less anxious.
Yeah, I agree with that, Sivan. And to link back to the question, if you're looking for ways to help people overcome their anxiety, I personally, like when I was experiencing a lot of sort of like existential dread associated with climate, getting connected to other people who cared was the thing that like really made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I had influence in the world, especially doing things like direct actions is, like there's studies that show that like protests don't do all that much to shift government opinion, but what they do is bring like deep levels of hope to the people who participate in them and the people who see them and feel seen in the concerns that they have. So that's really important. But if you're looking for ways to coax people in and to make them feel comfortable, I think that book clubs are a really great way to get that starting. There's like no risk associated with a book club, except that, you might like overcommit how many chapters you can read. And it's a great way to make people who maybe don't feel like they have like the authority to participate or feel like they have like enough information or all these sort of anxieties that people have that like limit their capacity to engage. I think book clubs can be great ways to engage with that. They can either be sort of like more like information and knowledge based. So for example, this summer, I'm planning a book club that we're going to go through this book called The Clay We're Made Of, which is like a complete history of the land that we live on, told from like Haudenosaunee perspective. But I think that for organizing, there's also like really great books that are about organizing that can make people feel a lot more comfortable, like engaging in different types of organized activities. Becoming an Ally is a really great Canadian sort of based book that gives a lot of really great details that I think like it's a great sort of intro to like why organizing is something that you can do and it's something that's important in a way that's super accessible. So I think being able to just bring people together and read in a way that's like non-committal, doesn't have a lot of risk associated with it is a great starting point for bigger and bolder action later on, so you can start building and nurturing those relationships.
Yeah, I love that. I might give anybody else a chance on the question of climate anxiety again. Just before we go to these last two questions, just because climate anxiety is a pretty serious subject. So Margaret or Alex, would you like to comment? Where do we pass to the next question? No,
Yeah.
Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said. I'm not sure I'm the best person to talk on this because I've got very severe climate anxiety, and here in Alberta, my premier is making it worse every day. But I do think trying to exercise the agency that you do have and trying to sort of wake up every day and know that you're doing your best is probably the things that help. And then sometimes you just sort of have to, this maybe it's bad advice, but sometimes you just have to kind of compartmentalize things and be able to say, okay, yeah, this is terrible, but I'm just going to go on and try and like focus on the things that I can focus on and try to not think too much about what else is going on. And then there are days where you have to sort of let yourself cry about it. And I think that's okay.
I appreciate the honesty. I think a lot of people can empathize with that. I'll go to this before last question. How can people in urban areas best engage or assist in rural and remote organizing to support these initiatives? As someone who is pretty back and forth between rural and urban areas due to school, I want to know how I can be most helpful in a non-invasive way. Very good question. So yeah, I think we talked about it a bit, how like overarching groups kind of help with funding. That was Savant's answer to that question. Are there other ways? This is a question we had prepared actually as well.
I mean,
I
there were
could,
people in urban setting who hugely helped with this campaign in the forms of I mean this is the campaign, but I'm sure it's relevant to other issues, just writing letters, talking to their local MLAs about the issue, raising awareness about the issue, sharing posts on social media. So much. Yeah.
I will say if you're going back and forth for school, I'm going to assume you're from the rural community, in which case, like, you can't be overstepping because it's your community, you live there, you grew up there. So like I don't think you should be too concerned about sort of overstepping in that sense. I had a similar experience while I was in school. I was doing like organizing in the summer and then going back and doing like student organizing. And something that I found like honestly really fun and quite useful was making information-based videos on TikTok. So what I would do was that I would focus I study political science with a specialization in like Canadian politics and Indigenous studies and sustainability. So I chose wherever I could, I made my essay topics about my home region. And then as I was doing research, I would make little video scripts and I would upload them online. So I was able to share a lot of like really cool information with people about like the history of the land that we lived on, the influence of different industries, the history of an environmental disaster that had happened in 1990, and little things like that one like really engaged me in learning more about my community and like leveraging the privilege that I had to like get a formal education and get like feedback from professors and have access to like the university database of like all of the academic papers that you have access to there, and make it, you know, like very specialized to my community and make these videos and people like recognize me like at the grocery store and stuff for making these videos. Like people bring it up to my mom, like people saw them, they appreciated it. And it's a great way to yeah, to be able to use the tools that you have and almost use your distance to an advantage, because like I was making like really I was making a lot of videos about our mayor and I did not have to see him because I was in a different province. So I didn't have to run into anybody who I was criticizing. So you can use those sort of like privileges that you have in being in school and the different access that you have and the lack of proximity that you have for a time can be a valuable tool. So I think that's a great way to get involved when you're kind of transient and maybe not able to commit to things like organizing meetings or days of action and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Peyton. You're getting approval in the chat, by the way. And then this last question, we have about like 2 minutes to finish it up, so we could give some time to Hope and Sarah after. It's about the onboarding process. So essentially, if tips and tricks, I guess, on like getting more people involved and what that process looks like. We don't have a lot of time, so it'd have to be pretty quick. But has anything worked in the past for you guys to get people interested, get them onboarded, and sort of keep them on as well to keep working with you guys? We've been over quite a bit of this as well to make it a concern for people in different ways, which helps a lot, I know. But yeah, I know there's a lot of help on this in the toolkit as well, if ever we don't have time right now.
I mean, I don't know how, I wonder just how relevant my answers will be because it's so pertinent to like a very specific and targeted campaign. But in our I see someone in the chat that bring food.
Yeah, bring food.
But I think for us it was just, I mean, yeah, making people feel welcomed, and then whatever also specific skills that they had and they could bring, like, making just using that and just trying to be as inclusive as possible and seeing the value in what everyone can bring into their and um and in consideration of like their own capacity, you know what I mean, because not everyone can devote like hours and hours of their time to a campaign. Yeah, including people in our chats and our emails and our meetings if they want to participate. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo Savan that, yeah, just really making sure people feel like seen and appreciated when they do show up. I never had like a formal onboarding process to any of, because it was just so informal, the work that was being done. And nobody was like like it was just very flexible and informal. So we didn't have an onboarding process, but you know, like when you're with a lot of people and you're doing a lot of work, it can be easy like not to say hi to a new person or to forget to do that. Or just, you know, not think it's important in the moment because you have so many things going on. But those things are really important, like saying hi, saying that you see them, asking them who they are, shaking their hand, looking them in the eyes. That is what makes people come back. And it does they do feel a level of accountability, like once you have engaged with people in that way and they feel seen, they feel a sense of responsibility to continue to come, or that they'll disappoint you, or things like that, which are all sort of like positive social pressures that keep us glued together as community and as a society. So yeah, just making sure people feel seen and that their work is recognized, and just not turning into any kind of clique behaviors is important.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's the little things, eh? Yeah, so I'll stop it there for the questions. Thank you for everybody that posted a question in the chat or for any kind of participation in general. I'm sorry I forgot to translate at the end, a little bit of confusion there. And yeah, so thanks to the panelists as well. I'll pass it back to Hope and Sarah for the closing remarks.
Sure, thank you so much. I'll unpin everybody just so that we can all be in the same room together. Sorry for the quick little tech thing. Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. This was an amazing conversation. I realize that some of you might have to go immediately. I know it's late for some of you, so thank you for staying all this time if you're on the eastern side of the country. But yeah, so delighted about this conversation. We'll be sending the recording to everyone afterwards, in case you want to, dive back into it or, go over a couple of questions. I think that this webinar really complements a lot of the things that we talk about in the toolkit. We have, so the way that the toolkit is organized is we have a primer section, we have kind of a tactics section, and then we have case studies that we go over. So I think a lot of the panelists had said it one time or another, they don't want to necessarily be prescriptive, like what will work in one area might not work in another area, but these are all kind of meant to share stories that have worked in the past for some communities and that could be translated into lessons for others. And so that's what we're really trying to do here. Just open up what is possible. I think so much of this is just learning what is possible and expanding our imaginations of what can be. And so thank you so much for being here and allowing our imaginations to grow together. Yeah, Sarah's putting some links in. Do you want to have any last thoughts at all, Sarah? Yeah, okay. Thank you again for joining. We'll put out a follow-up email with all of the links and all of the recordings. But again, thank you for joining today, and really hope you enjoy the toolkit. So long. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.